Now that the camshaft covers and bolts and caps have all been removed, the next thing is to actually remove the camshaft. Now, on a stock motor, if you had the cover still, you'd have to do some trimming here to be able to allow you to pull the camshafts out. That cover actually isn't even on here, so it's not an issue. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually just to pull this off. So tilt the camshaft down, pull the belt away, it's easy as that, and pull the cam out. Now we're going to reinstall the Skunk Pro 1 camshafts. What you need to do is make sure your top dot here is on your up. This is your up on these cam gears is your up mark, and you need to make sure that your alignment marks that'll have the pointers are going to be facing horizontally. So you're going to put your first camshaft in, this is the intake cam, and you're going to make sure that your dot's up and that your other dots are approximately horizontal, and just slide the belt in there and make sure the teeth line up. Now you're going to grab the exhaust cam gear, and you're going to pull the belt off a little bit, allow for some slack, and you're going to get these dots lined up right about approximately as close as you can. And you're going to tilt the camshaft forward so you have slack, and then you're going to pull the cam back. See how close it lines up. Now, what I like to do to make sure that the dots are lined up, you can see they're slightly misaligned. I like to put my hand on the very edge of the camshaft as acting like a cam cap, and I like to push down on them. And once you apply tension across the cam, it usually brings the dots back up, and you can see how well they're lined up. They're actually, the first try here, they're lined up pretty well. And see that this is top dead center. The crank pulley has not moved, so your belt is still, the tension on the belt is still aligned for your top dead center position mark, and it's as simple as that. Now we need to install the cam caps. Now the first thing we need to do is make sure your cam caps are in the right orientation. The cam caps are actually numbered, starting, this would be number 1 all the way to number 5. Now they'll have an actual number on the very top, and you'll see that the stud corresponds to where the valve cover would bolt to. So here we have the exhaust side number 1 cam cap, and it's as simple as placing it back on. Now before you do, you should apply Honda Bond or RTV seal here for where the cam seal goes, and apply it small amount and spread it evenly with your fingers, and then simply put the cam cap back on. These are doweled, and they should be relatively a snap fit when you push them back in. Now, an important thing is, this is number 1, this is cam cap number 2. They're numbered on the cam caps, but the arrow, there's going to be an arrow that actually points toward the timing belt side. This is critical. If you have these backwards, you will have major engine damage. The most critical cam cap is going to be number 3. This is actually where the oiling holes come to feed for the VTEC, and there's an O-ring that needs to be in here, which is there, and the cam cap has to be obviously installed with the arrow pointing towards the timing belt side, but the O-ring still it has to be in its proper location, or VTEC may not work. You won't get enough oil pressure. So we install the cam cap. When installing the number 5 cam cap on the exhaust side, you have a cam seal right here. You're going to want to make sure that you apply Honda Bond in this area, and you're going to want to apply Honda Bond on the cam seal. These cam seals usually leak, and they need to be replaced. The next step is to place the cam cap girdle and the bolts back onto the actual cam caps. Now, you have to watch, because the stud here has to be on the inner side for the valve cover to bolt onto properly. So it's as simple as lining the bolts back in and pushing the plate down. The next step is to actually tighten down the cam girdle and the bolts. So you're going to start with the inner bolts and work your way out. Now that these bolts have all been hand tightened, you need to go through and actually tighten them with a torque wrench in the factory sequence. You start with the inners and you work your way out. And these are the 12 mil head bolts are torqued to 20 foot-pounds, and the 10 mil head bolts here are torqued to approximately 8 foot-pounds or hand tight. I have my snap-on digital torque wrench set to 20 foot-pounds, so I'm going to start with the inner bolts and work my way out. The next step before you put the valve cover and the distributor back on is to check to make sure your belt tension is evenly distributed across the belt. Make sure it feels nice and tight on both sides here and up here. And you want to make sure that you don't have much more than about a 1/2 inch deflection on the timing belt on either side here. This feels good. And you're going to spin the motor around approximately 2 crankshaft revolutions to ensure that the belt's still riding properly and the tension's distributed back through the timing belt correctly. Let me stop at top dead center here in the cam gear again. Feel the belt. It's nice and tight. The tension is good, and this doesn't need to be retensioned. So we're ready to put on the valve cover and the distributor. Next step is to place the valve cover back on. Make sure that your gasket is aligned all around the edges here, and it's not overhanging. And you're ready to put it right back on. Next step is to put your grommets back on the valve cover. Make sure that the metal part's facing up. And the last step is to put the 10 mil nuts back on the valve cover. Now the next step is to put the distributor back on. There's a keyway here on the distributor, and there's a keyway in the camshaft. The distributor can only go on one way, meaning this keyway can be 180 out, and you might have to spin it. So looking at where the camshaft keyway is right now, I'm going to align approximately where it should go and see if it goes. Okay, it's not, so it needs to go 180 degrees the other way. You can see the distributor fits on. Now you're going to put the 3 bolts back in here, hold the distributor on. And you have your two connectors here. You're going to connect these. And lastly, you're going to put your spark plug wires back on. These are OEM spark plug wires, so they actually have the cylinder number that corresponds with which post they go to on here. So, cylinder number 1 is here, cylinder number 2 is here, cylinder number 3 is here, and lastly cylinder number 4 goes here. That concludes how to do a camshaft swap on a Honda B Series motor. Now this takes into account that you don't have your timing belt off a tooth or two in one direction or another, and you also didn't see the valve lash wasn't set on this motor because we swapped from Skunk 2 Pro 1 camshafts to Skunk 2 Pro 2 camshafts. The base circle hasn't changed significantly enough that we had to set valve lash over again. I'd like to thank Skunk 2 for donating these camshafts for this cam swap, and Jeff Racer, Full Race Motorsports, for letting us use his Civic.